All by word of mouth, all because you just told everyone about it. And I have so many stories of families who have adopted that way. And so, yes, technology is still good, but I think don't underestimate the power of the old school just telling people that you're adopting. And you might be surprised at the possible matches that you can have with pregnant moms by just word of mouth.
Your dream is to become a mom. My dream is to help you get there. I'm Rebecca Gruenspan, a single mom through domestic adoption and an adoption consultant for over a decade. I'll be your guide, along with other adoption professionals and members of the adoption constellation, walking you step by step down this beautiful and complex path of adopting your baby. When I was going through the adoption process, I had no idea what I was doing, what I needed to know, or more importantly, who to trust. Well, after helping hundreds and hundreds of families grow through the beauty and complexity of adoption, I've learned more than a thing or two, and let me tell you, it's not always rainbows and butterflies. This isn't just another podcast sharing adoption stories, but it's for you if you're genuinely committed to diving in with an open heart, eager to learn everything there is to know about adopting a baby so that you can show up for yourself and your child in the best way possible. This podcast is for you if you're ready to put your newfound knowledge into action. Adoption isn't for the weak of heart, and it certainly isn't done when your baby gets placed in your arms. If that's what you think, I'm afraid you're living in La La Land. My promise to you is to keep it real if you promise to keep digging. We'll acknowledge the hard, and we'll also celebrate the joy that is adoption. You ready? Let's do this. Have you ever wondered how much you could save both financially and emotionally by investing in the right resources before starting the adoption process? Today we have a special guest who can answer that and much more. Welcome to the Adoption Roadmap podcast, where we guide you every step of the way on your adoption journey. I'm thrilled to introduce our guest, Lucrece Bundy. Lucrece is not only an experienced adoption attorney, but also a passionate advocate for families navigating the complex world of adoption. Originally from West Africa and now a longtime resident of Omaha, Nebraska, Lucrece has dedicated her career to helping hundreds of families successfully adopt children. Lucrece founded her own adoption law practice in 2016. Her deep commitment to her faith and her clients led her to identify a significant gap in the information available to prospective adoptive parents. Information that, if known, could save them thousands of dollars and years of heartache. In today's episode, Lucrece will share her insights on the importance of investing in the right resources before you even begin the adoption process, what the adoption process looks like, and how to build the perfect adoption team. When she's not busy changing lives through her work, you'll find Lucrece powering through a CrossFit session, dancing up a storm, or enjoying precious moments with 4 very handsome men in her life, her husband and 3 sons. She's also a fellow Aries. I knew I sensed a fire in her that I related to also. Please join me in welcoming Lucrece Bundy to the show. Hello, Lucrece. I'm going to jump right in with the first question.
Yes, thank you. I'm so happy to be here, Rebecca.
Awesome. Today, we are talking about investing in resources before you even officially start the adoption process. So before getting your home study, which is officially the first step, I'd love to work a little backwards. What are some of the consequences if you don't invest in resources first?
Yeah, so what I've seen with, hundreds of families over almost a decade of practicing law and also just, helping families through the adoption process is that they make a lot of costly mistakes when they just jump into the adoption journey without first taking the time to kind of examine or understand what the process actually is going to be like, what it's going to take, the step-by-step process that they need to actually, go through to do their adoption. So Actually, one of the biggest mistakes that families make is to do their adoption home study first.
Mm-hmm.
I advise my families that the first thing they actually need to do is understand all the different options available to them. I mean, you have to know what's available. You have to know the pros and cons of each. You have to know the cost of each before you even dive into your home study, because your home study is tailored to the type of adoption that you choose. So I actually teach my families, don't just dive into your home study because everybody's telling you to.
Mm-hmm.
Take the time to really understand what your options are, the pros and cons of each, the cost of each, so that once you pick, international adoption or foster care adoption, newborn adoption, you are confident that that's the way you want to grow your family, and then you can invest in that path and go down that path.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And also, even, you had mentioned starting before the home study and doing all these things. And the home study is only good for a year.
Yeah,
So if you start your home study and then figure out, oh, I actually want to do this, or, you know, something changes in what you originally thought, or you even start working with a consultant, right? Which we'll maybe talk about later, but you've already wasted so much time with your home study that you could have saved before and maybe saved yourself from renewing the home study, which costs a lot of money.
absolutely. And I'm surprised all the time. There's so many families that come to me and they're dead set on domestic newborn adoption
Yeah.
because, I don't know, that's just what they heard on social media and they just think that that's the best way to go. And after we start working together, a lot of my families have changed their minds after they actually understood the pros and cons and, like foster care adoption, for example.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of confusion around that. People think they have to be foster parents first. But once they understand, adopting from foster care, some families actually change their mind and they decide, you know what? In this season of our lives, we really want to give a safe home to a child who's already looking for a family. We're well suited for that. And that's actually the way we feel like we need to go as a family. So that's why I just stress the importance of making that decision first. What type of adoption do I really want to do?
Mm-hmm.
But doing it with the understanding of what it entails, the step by step process, pros and cons, costs, and all of that before you ever even think about doing a home study.
Yeah. Such a good point.
Yeah.
So when I think of adoption, there's some big buckets that I can think of. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on resources for each of them. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to kind of throw out some of these buckets that I think of. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Awesome. So the two biggest setbacks that I think of fall under financial and emotional. If that's true, and you also believe that, are there resources that can potentially help with both of these big buckets?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think for the emotional piece, when the families understand what to expect, it
Mm-hmm.
actually really helps to calm them down. I
Mm.
feel like it's like with anything in life, when you know, okay, this is what's expected of me, you don't have to worry and wonder what's going to be my next step. What do I have to do next? Or you already know what's coming and you can prepare for it. And
Mm-hmm.
so, as far as the emotional piece, I really encourage families again, you want to take the time to understand, like, you need like a bird's eye overview of the process. That way, you're not wondering, okay, if I call the caseworker and I do this, then what happens? And what if I call the agency? And what if they don't answer back? All these questions you have. When you have a bird's eye overview of what the process should look like, for you, then it really reduces that emotional angst that a lot of families have starting the process and really just not knowing where to start, what to do, what to expect. Also, for the emotional piece, I really encourage families to also be a part of a Facebook group. I know a lot of people are not on Facebook anymore, but basically find a community that's going to help give you emotional support throughout the process. So the professional you pick may be a good source for that, not always. I usually recommend people making sure you have family members, friends who you can call and say, this is what's going on. Help me, pray for me, if you're a believer. But that support helps so much to know that somebody knows what you're going through, that they care, and that you can actually just share with them what's going on and get that emotional support. So, as far as emotional support is concerned, that's what I would say. Knowing the process really helps bring you that peace of mind. And then having people in your life that you can talk to that's not just the professional you're working with, but other people that you can talk to. And even other parents that have adopted before that can tell you it's going to be okay. We've gone through this too. Just really helps you to know, okay, I'm not alone. They've gone through this too. It's going to be okay. So that community, I think, is really important for families, for the emotional
Yeah.
side.
And I just want to jump in and take it even a step further, that I think emotionally, it is never too early to start working with an adoption competent therapist if you know adoption is something you're going to be walking into. Because I find that there are a lot of things throughout the process, or even maybe after you bring your baby home, that are going to trigger you. Maybe you haven't fully grieved the fertility loss, or, the infertility that you were suffering. Maybe you get triggered by past trauma. Whatever it is, during this process, those things are going to come up and be put in front of you in a way that's going to test you at times. And at the beginning, you don't even know what you don't know.
Right.
And sometimes just calling a therapist and saying, it was recommended to me to work with you. I don't know why, but I'm starting this process. If it's a good therapist who knows what they're doing, they will be able to guide you through that stuff. So I would add that. And I agree with everything you said. The first step in our adoption roadmap process that we walk people through is called adoption intelligence. And it's exactly what you said. It's walking them step by step through the entire adoption process so that they have a good understanding before they really jump in with 2 feet. So I couldn't agree with you more.
I agree with you, Rebecca. I think the therapist is just so much needed, even for people who have never used a therapist before, because I think a lot of families don't understand the emotional impact. I'm like trying to find the right word. The emotional impact that adopting has on someone, even if you're relatively healthy, you've never had to use a therapist before, you're probably going to need one for adoption. And I think one other thing that comes up a lot for families, maybe that they don't think will come up, is the open adoption situation. Families maybe, kind of like go with the flow. Everybody's saying open adoption. Okay, I'll be open to adoption too. I think and they're kind of like mentally agreeing with open adoption and how it's great. But actually, if your heart, like once you adopt your baby and like your baby is home, you're like, this is my child, you'll find that you're going to have some like some tugging going on in your heart with that. It's like, the questions you have that maybe you didn't say out loud. Why do I feel like I'm sharing my baby with this lady who said she was relinquishing? Like, why do I still have to make time for this? I mean, you need to be able to be honest with where you are so you can actually get help and healing versus pushing it down and pretending like you don't feel it.
Yeah.
Because it's going to come out one way or the other. So those are really important things to understand, that you can just be a robot saying, I agree with everything that people are saying about open adoption. Yes, birth mom should be involved. And yes, all these things. But do you really, though? Is your heart really in agreement with that? Yeah. Because if it's not, you're just gonna have problems. And so it's good to have a therapist to help you, talk through those things until you can really come, to a place of peace in your heart about it.
Yeah. Even something so simple as, what if your child refers to his or her birth mother as mom?
Right.
How does that feel for you? And like all these things that you don't even think about to begin with. So, okay. So that's emotional. Now the other biggie.
Yes. Financial. I know.
Before we go on, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. We still have so much to talk about. The decision to place a child for adoption is easily the most challenging decision a woman makes in her lifetime. For many birth moms, they feel like the center of focus during the process of planning adoption, but after choosing placement, so many report feeling unseen, making an already difficult experience even more painful. Adoption does not erase motherhood, and that's why Solace gift boxes for birth mothers were created, so that every birth mother will feel seen in her motherhood. These thoughtfully curated and artistically designed care packages for birth mothers contain artisan goods from small businesses and are available in 3 unique themes. The The Peace, Love, and Pamper box is spa-themed and is ideal during the weeks after birth. It happens to be the one that I personally sent to my son's birth mother, and she loved it. The Paper Crane box is inspired by the Japanese legend of the paper crane and sends hope and healing, and is perfect for a creative person for a birthday or holiday. Finally, the Light box is a reminder of needing darkness to see the light, and is a beautiful thinking of you gift. The boxes are available in 3 sizes: mini, standard, and deluxe, and are $59.99 or less. Shipping is included. Don't know a birth mom? Sponsor a box today, and the company will distribute a box to a birth mother identified through their public nomination form. Solace is a product of Absolute Love Adoption, a licensed 501c3. For more information, go to adoptsolace.com. The Adoption Roadmap Podcast and RG Adoption Consulting are proud affiliates of Solace gift boxes for birth moms. Okay, so that's emotional. Now the other biggie.
Yes, financial. I know. You know, what I find really interesting, Rebecca, is whenever I say the word adoption, I find that in America specifically, people immediately think newborn adoption, which it fascinates me because there's so many different types of adoptions. I mean, as an adoption lawyer, I do so many different types that when I think adoption, I'm thinking, which one are you talking about immediately? Because there's so many different types.
Do you want to just go through? Yeah, go through
Yeah,
those.
yeah. So there are step-parent adoptions. I do a ton of in my law office. There's relative adoptions. There's foster care adoptions, obviously. We have international adoptions. You can even, adopt an adult, So I do these routinely in my office. So I always think of adoption as there's so many that it's what type of adoption are you talking about? But when I talk about adoption on social media, people immediately think adopt a baby. And I'm thinking, no, I just mean like adoption in general, like what type of adoption are you looking for? So I'm saying that because when it comes to finances, it depends on the type of adoption that you're doing, right?
Yeah.
So I find that this financial conversation really has to do with families who want to adopt a baby, because that's where people get really mad about the finances. International adoption, yes, but I don't see that argument so much with international adoption, because I think families just understand, well, it's international. Of course, I'm going to have to spend money. But when it comes to newborn adoption, there's just such a anger or something. I don't know even what to call it, but it's such a a negative reaction to the finances when it comes to newborn. And I just find it very interesting as an adoption attorney. But anyway, what I would say about finances specifically for newborn adoption is I think unless the laws change to where agencies have to account for how much they are charging adoptive families, either you kind of swallow it and do it, or you just don't do it. You know what I mean? It's how else do you navigate through the finances with adoption if that's not the case, right? So we really need for laws to be changed when it comes to the outrageous amount that some agencies are charging adoptive families. And I feel like until we have something legal when it comes to that, there's not much that families can do. So what I advise clients is, first of all, you want to know what you are able to handle. If your budget, like when I talk to families, some families tell me, well, I can only afford $2,000. Well, then maybe you should look into foster care adoption, right? Because the finances really are also going to direct you about the type of adoption that's best for your family. So kind of going back to that conversation earlier, understanding what type of adoption you even need to do. I'm not an advocate for families going in debt or getting a second mortgage on their house to adopt. I just don't think that's a wise thing to do. Some families think it's okay. But what I advise my clients is if that's really all you can afford, but you really want to adopt in this season of your life, then you're going to have to cross off something on your list, right? And you have to be realistic about what it is that you can actually afford versus being so angry that it costs, I don't know, $45,000 to adopt a baby. If you can only afford this much, you can still adopt. It's just not going to be a baby, right? So I guess I see finances in a very different lens, doing so many different types of adoptions. And I actually, my heart is really for families to look more into adopting children who are already waiting in foster care who need families, because that's actually the least expensive way to adopt. And so a lot of my conversations with families kind of go from that to, have you ever considered adopting
Mm,
your child from foster care? Because you're not going to have to spend $45,000. But a lot of families just are not looking into that option. So honestly, what I tell families is, there's grant opportunities. Of course, we all know that you can apply for grants. There's the federal adoption tax credit that everybody can apply for. That gives, I think the credit now is $18,000 or something like that. That you can get after you adopt. Even if your adoption fails, you can still apply for the tax credit, which I think is amazing for families. So apart from those different ways for you to offset the cost,
mhm.
I really don't know how else families can deal with, the cost of adoption. I feel like we can talk about it all day long, but there's nothing that we can do to change it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
The families have to make a decision about, okay, we either spend this money, we find resources to help us offset the cost, or we look into another type of adoption that's not so expensive.
Yeah. I think that's all great advice, and certainly there's such a need for foster care and for foster to adopt.
Yeah.
Um, there are a couple, I actually just had a conversation yesterday with a couple that only has $4,000 or $5,000 saved.
Wow.
And one of the things that we did as an organization through RG Adoption Consulting, which is my company, we signed on with a group called Your Adoption Finance Coach. And so, as an organization, our clients can have access to that. And what that is, and I'll link it in the show notes, is that you can be matched one on one with a financial coach to help you with the finances for adoption. So, if a family can do that first, or work with a financial advisor first, and look at what they have coming in, what they have saved, how much they can start saving. Think about things like, are you comfortable fundraising? Are there family members who can help you out with either a gift or a loan? How can you front whatever the amount is for the adoption tax credit? I actually think it's less than 18,000. I want to say
Okay.
14 or 15, but I'll put the link in the show notes for that as well, because it changes every year.
Right.
Um, and all those things, and kind of make a plan for yourself first. I think it is definitely still doable, but maybe it's not doable right this moment. Maybe in about 3 or 4 months from now, you can start the process knowing that it'll probably take, 3 to 6 months before you get a match and the bulk of the money is due. So I think there are ways ahead of time to meet with people to utilize some resources to put a plan together financially, but also kind of what you said earlier on, a lot of it is just wrapping your head around it and just accepting it, right? So the
Right.
emotional and the financial come together at that point
Yes.
because it is a
Yes.
lot. It might
Yes.
make you want to throw up a little bit in your mouth, the
Yes.
amount that it is. And the sooner you can kind of just accept it, meditate on it, and say, okay, this is what it is. And you can't get so emotionally attached
Right.
to that amount because it's a lot, and that
Right.
will really, the emotional and the financial can really be at a bad crossroads if you let the amount affect you so much emotionally.
Yeah, I also think that a lot of families think they need to have, I don't know why I keep using this number. That's just what keeps coming in my head.
That's
I think
okay.
families think they need to have $45,000 in savings before they even start the
Hmm.
journey. And I tell families, like, well, first, that's unreasonable because it's going to take you how long to be able to save that kind of money to put aside before you start your journey? It makes more sense to find out whatever professional you work with, how much will the total be, and then decide with your spouse, how can we budget this accordingly?
Hmm.
As we kind of go through the adoption process, how are we going to be able to to front that money, because I find that a lot of professionals don't just ask for a bunch of money up front. It's kind of, a chunk at a time is due. So for families to understand that you don't have to just sign a check of $45,000 to a professional, it is going to be something you have to do as you go. To also alleviate that concern that people have when they think they have to have all of this money to get started, when really that's not the case. You just need to have enough to keep going, to keep, paying for the stages. And again, this is specifically for newborn adoption, I should say.
Yeah,
And I know, with you, Rebecca, that's what you help families with, is newborn adoption. But
mostly.
yeah, I would
Although
say just don't.
there are more and more intervention cases where some states can come in and help make a private adoption from a child that was in foster care, which is amazing. I hope it starts to happen more and more, and it also reduces the fees a lot too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, let's get into your expertise. Another bucket in adoption is legal considerations. Obviously, that is something that you have to consider when it comes to adoption. Can you discuss with us the importance of understanding the legal aspects of adoption? And are there any specific legal resources or advisors that parents should consult with before they begin?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think families have the option, if they want to hire an adoption lawyer, I would say hire an experienced adoption lawyer to kind of just be there for them as they're working through their adoption journey, so they can ask whatever legal questions they need along the way. Families obviously have the freedom to do that. I don't know that it's necessary, but I think for families who are just kind of worried about the legal aspect of things, the professional you work with will explain to you the process, right? I mean, they've hopefully have done this a lot, and so they know what they should or should not do.
Right.
But sometimes, obviously, you have these sketchy professionals who are not doing what they're supposed to do. And so, one of the things that I tell families to really look for is, what is your contract? What does your contract say? Because a lot of professionals, I would say agencies specifically, I found with just experience with families, is they will tell you that you cannot advertise on your own or work with anyone else once you start working with them. And I just think that that really just hurts families, because
Yeah.
you don't want to be stuck with one professional and not have the freedom to try to, match with an expectant mother any other way. So that's one of the things I tell families. If you don't want to hire a lawyer, just read through your contract and ask them that question specifically. Can we still tell people about our adoption? Can we, I don't know, change agencies if we want to? That's really important to know the freedom you have in that. So that's and then the second thing I would say when it comes to the legal things is, again, the professionals should know how to do this, but if you end up with a sketchy one, you want to ask them about what they do regarding birth father rights. Because when you're dealing with sketchy ones who are not doing things legally, they may or they may not make sure that the father's rights are addressed, because we hear about the mom and the mom and the mom all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, fathers also have rights.
Mm-hmm.
And so the father's rights also have to be dealt with during this adoption process. So if you're working with a professional and they never talk about the birth father, that should be a big red flag for you. And you might want to consider at that point, scheduling consultation with an adoption lawyer and asking them what to do in that situation. But I would say those are probably the big things. Also making sure that you know who you're working with. Some facilitators are like disguised as agencies because of the way that they have their information on the website. We know that California right now has banned facilitators. So, there's just a couple of things that you want to make sure that the person you're working with is licensed,
Mm-hmm.
that they're still holding their license,
Mm-hmm.
that they have obviously good reviews from other families, that they're doing things legally in the states that they're licensed in, and that you just don't find yourself spending $5,000 to $10,000 and then finding out later that the agency is, they've been under investigation by the FBI or something. That stinks. So yeah, just a couple of legal things for you if you don't want to hire a lawyer that you should just be aware of.
You brought up birth fathers and birth father rights. So I know in many adoption situations, for whatever reason, either the father is unknown or for whatever reason, the mom is just not comfortable naming him, which, let's face it, whether the law states it or not, nobody can force a mom to name anybody. What happens in those situations? Do the fathers still have rights, and what does that look like?
Yeah, so the laws are different in the states about this, which makes it more confusing for families. I wish there was just one federal law that everybody had to follow to make it easier and
Me
uniform.
too.
But like in some states, mom doesn't have to name the father, which I just think is appalling. I really do. Because in my experience as an adoption lawyer, some moms know the father, but they just don't want him to know that he has a child because they're afraid that he might want to parent the child. And so I just think that's wrong on a lot of levels. Anyway, like morally, I just think that's wrong. But yeah, there are some states that allow mom, even if she knows the father, to not name him. Other states require for mom to name the father, actually all possible biological fathers. That's in my state here. You have to sign an affidavit swearing about, any possible biological fathers. You even have to talk about like what all sexual relationships did you have, 6 months before you were pregnant and maybe 6 months after.
Okay.
Because what happens in some states where this is required, if mom doesn't name the father and then he gets wind of it somehow, that will annul the adoption. If the dad
Mm,
was, fit dad, mom just didn't like him for whatever reason, but he's able to parent and he wants to parent, and mom did this whole shenanigan and got the adoption to go forward. If dad gets wind of it, he can fight the adoption and get it annulled. So that hurts the adoptive families because they're the innocent victims in this case. And so for me, father's rights is really, really important because I know, again, we talk about moms a lot. Mom is the one carrying the baby, but the father is still the father. And if he wants to parent, he should have the opportunity to parent his child. And so that's why I say, like, just watch out for that when you're working with professionals. Again, it depends on the state, right? If mom doesn't have to name, mom usually will choose not to name. That's what I find in those states, even if she
mm,
knows who the father is. Um, yeah, I
interesting.
just think that's sad because I know a lot of dads who, had a baby with a lady and now they're married and they're very much involved in their child's life and they wanted to be a dad. And some dads that I've had, I've got to talk to and they just never even knew they had a child.
Yeah.
And so fast forward 5 years later, mom wants her husband to adopt the kid and he's like, I didn't even know you were pregnant. So
I have usually found that um, a mom isn't naming when there's been abuse or she's scared of him.
mhm.
I think that, at least from what I've seen, those are the more common. Um, those are the more common places where she might not name. But yes, I think a father's rights are very important. And I know that in some states, I mean, without getting too deep into the legal, that there are paternal registries to do things to try to find the fathers if they're not available. But I don't want to go down that rabbit hole of that. But I do want to talk about something else that you mentioned, which is that every state has different laws. And unfortunately, there is not a federal law that kind of, for all these adoption rules and laws. I wish there was too. Given that, prior to adopting, is it important to talk to an attorney in your own state to understand what you can and can't do as a hopeful parent?
I think so, yes. I think it's really good for adoptive families to have an attorney that they can talk to during the adoption process and get
Yeah.
questions answered because sometimes after they start working with a professional, maybe they're not getting a call back. I get a lot of emails from families who are like, we're working with an agency, but our caseworker never gets a hold of us. We have this question. I'm thinking, your caseworker should be answering all these questions. So I think it's good for families to hire an adoption lawyer and just tell them, hey, we just want to use you for consultation purposes, pay the fee or whatever. And then you can have a lawyer that you can talk to and ask those questions as you're going through the process.
For sure. One of the one thing that comes to mind when I think of, have that initial consultation, and most attorneys will do like a free phone call with you just to ask a simple question, but just even asking, am I allowed to adopt out of state? Can I finalize out of state? I think that's where, like, you need to know. So certain states won't allow somebody who doesn't live there to finalize in their state. So you have to finalize the adoption back in your home state, which is fine. The only thing that may come into play there is that your home state has a cap on expenses for the birth mom. In which case, suddenly you might be faced with, oh my gosh, I adopted this baby through an agency in Alabama when I live in Connecticut, and Connecticut only approves $2,000 of expenses, and we paid way more than that. I think that's where some of the nuances may come into play, right? That they need to know about before they start.
Yeah, that's a good thing to know. I mean, as they're going through the process, the agency should be able to alert them of that because the agency knows that they are
They
from a
should.
different state and that they are adopting from a different state. So they should already have all that information out there for the families as they're going through the process so that there isn't a surprise after
Right.
baby comes. So there shouldn't be any surprises by the time baby comes home. So those are good questions to be asking your agency while you're going through that. So if that comes up, like the fees, for example, just ask the question during the process so you get clarity before you move forward.
Yeah. Are you able to work with me in my state? Where do I
Yes.
finalize? But those are the types of things I think legally ahead of time are important for you to know. Because like you said, sometimes things are missed or an
Yeah.
agency just doesn't cross all their T's and dot all their I's.
Right.
And when it's time for finalization is not the time you want to learn that.
Right. Right.
So having that initial conversation can really be helpful. Okay, another bucket, and you mentioned this right at the beginning, is community.
Yeah.
And you were saying how that is something you should have in place before you begin. And you mentioned Facebook. Are there other places where you can find their tribe? Is Facebook the best place? Talk to me about community and ways that can be a really supportive resource.
Yeah, I think it depends on the person's personality, right? I mean, some people hate social media. So if that's you, I mean, don't be on Facebook because you're probably not going to get very much involved in there. And
Yeah,
so I believe that some states have like adoptive parent support groups. And so it just takes a little bit of research, look in your state, see if there's adoptive families that meet, maybe online or they meet in person, maybe call adoption agencies, see if they have, support groups for adoptive parents. So that's another way that you can find a support group. So there's a lot of other ways to do that without having to be on a Facebook group. So yeah, those are the other ways that I can think of that people can find that community that they're looking for without having to be on social media all the time.
yeah.
Anymore, people are really kind of getting away from Facebook or don't even have a Facebook account. So yeah, that's what I would say. Whatever professional you talk to, see if they can give you resources in your state about support groups that you can maybe be a part of so that you can ask questions and you can't meet with other people who are going through the journey with you.
For sure. And sometimes, like if you're going through your home study, like I remember when I went through my home study eons ago, we were required to get a certain amount of education, and those classes were held in person at the agency. And that was such a great way to meet other adoptive parents. And I've heard of families really connecting that way.
Yeah.
Facebook is still good for groups, even though I agree less and less
Yeah.
people are. And you have to be careful also because
Yeah.
these groups, there's people that can become really
Yeah.
volatile, judgmental. So you have to be careful. And sometimes if you are signed up with a home study agency, an attorney, an agency, a consultant, I know we have our own private community group that is super, super, super supportive and negativity is not allowed. And so you want to make sure it's a safe space for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. That's the biggest thing. You want to know that you can ask any questions. Like you're just curious, you don't know about it. And I feel like you're going to get all this negative feedback from people saying, well, why are you even asking that question? And, all of these kinds of things. So that's very important. You want to feel supported and you want to know that whatever questions you're asking, they're not dumb questions, especially when you're starting the process. You don't know what you're doing. You need to ask the questions so
Totally.
that you know how to go through it. So yeah, I agree, Rebecca.
Okay, cool. I know there's a lot to learn when it comes to adoption. So much to learn. I always say it's at least 18 years of education that you're committing to. So
Yeah.
what role do you think education plays, and what role do educational resources play in preparing for adoption? And do you have any specific books, courses, seminars that you recommend prior to starting?
Yeah, I mean, I will keep saying this forever. I feel like I feel like education is the most important thing that you need to invest in when it comes to adoption. And again,
Yes.
you can feel like, oh, but I saved up this money so I can adopt this baby. I don't have enough money to invest in education. I'll just Google it. The problem with that is Google has a lot of conflicting information. And so it's going to be really hard for you to get the education you need on Google alone or on Instagram alone or on Facebook alone, because what you get is a lot of hodgepodge stuff from different people's experiences that may not have anything to do with your
Right.
specific adoption journey.
Good
So I
point.
actually find that that's a dangerous way for people to get quote unquote educated, because that's how a lot of people end up making mistakes, wasting a lot of money, working with the wrong agency. And then 3 years later, they're like, oh my gosh, my adoption journey was so difficult. Well, yeah, because you listened to bad advice, right? And so education, I know that it seems counterintuitive because again, you just want to get the baby home. I just want to spend the money to get the baby home. But if you actually take a step back and invest in the education you need, you will actually have a smoother journey. You will save yourself a lot of money and a lot of headache and usually years in the process. And so I tell my families it is wise for you to invest in your education so that you can have a smoother adoption journey. I mean, you can still try to do it on your own. Obviously, there's people who will do that, but most of the families that I've seen do that always regret it when they find out later on that there were a lot of things they missed that they didn't know about, and that if they did, they would
Yeah.
have chosen a different path. Just save yourself the headache and don't do that.
So
So
give
for
us some
resources,
examples. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. One of my favorite books, I would say, is from Karen Purvis.
Okay.
And gosh, I can't remember the name right now. Do
Is
you,
it
do
the
you know the name
connected
of
child?
The
Is
Connected Child? Yes. That's probably one of my all-time favorite books when it comes to actually not just adoption, but even just fostering in general. But what it does, it helps you understand trauma, and it actually gives you like tips on this is what you do in this specific situation.
Oh, great.
When this child reacts this way, this is what's really going on underneath it. And this is how you can respond appropriately to help them relearn. I mean, it is a fantastic book. So
I
that's
can't
the
believe
one.
I've never read that one. I'm
Oh,
getting it finally. I'll go
it's so
listen
good.
to it. I
Yeah.
did the primal wound, but I haven't done the connected child.
Yeah. Just get it on Audible. You can
Yeah.
listen to while you're driving, which is great. But
Perfect.
that's my all-time favorite book on just knowing how to work with children who come from hard places, which includes babies who are adopted. But that's probably my favorite resource, I would say. As far as education, obviously, I would tell families I would love for you to work with me because I provide an unbiased streamlined source of everything they need for a successful adoption.
Tell us
So for
about that.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, so for that piece of it, it's a 12-month program, and I give them everything they need to know. So all of the information that you need to before your adoption, during your adoption, and even after you adopt is all included. And I also personally guide you through it based on my experience as an adoption lawyer, helping hundreds of families through the process. So that's really helpful for families as well. So those are the resources. And then as far as community, we already talked about that, kind of how to find your community. In finances, I agree with, your adoption finance coach. I think they're an amazing resource for families to
Yeah.
figure out the financial aspect of it.
Yeah, going back to your course for a second, I'd love to learn a
Yeah.
little bit more. So you said you guide families through the process. So beforehand, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, it's determining what path of adoption might be right for you, right?
Yes.
And then what are some of the things that they might learn throughout the year with you?
Yeah. So they learn so they learn what does adoption actually look like. And it's
Okay.
comprehensive because it's not just for those who want to adopt a baby. It's also for families who want to adopt from foster care. It's also for
Awesome.
families who want to adopt internationally. So whichever path you want to choose for your adoption, I walk them through the entire process. So what to expect, What type of professionals should you be looking for? What are the right questions to ask to properly vet these professionals? How do you figure out finances and budget so that you don't, have to take a second mortgage out on your house, all the resources that you need for the financial part of it. And also after adoption, I believe that's so important after adoption because it's kind of like marriage, like sometimes you can think of your wedding day as I'm married, but really your marriage is after the wedding day. It's the rest of your life. That's the same thing with adoption. So adoption day is great. We celebrate baby is home, but really your adoption starts after adoption day is over. And because now you are committed for the rest of your life. So you need resources to help you after baby comes home because you're going to need it. And so it's
Yes.
comprehensive in that way. So I give them the resources for everything they need so that they don't have to be researching on Facebook and Google and trying to figure out like which one is best for me. So I curate the resources that from people that I know really well, that I know do amazing work, and give them those resources so they don't have to be. That it just saves them time and saves them a lot of money.
I love it. So
Yeah.
any way that you look at adoption, you be there to support. So how can somebody find this course and how much is it?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. You can, send me an email. I'm also on Facebook, just at Lucrece Bundy. I think it's everywhere. At Lucrece Bundy Instagram, at Lucrece H Bundy, I think Facebook, and then I'm on YouTube as well, just Lucrece Bundy as well.
And that's where they would find the course
Yes,
or
yeah,
information about it.
yeah, information about the course. And so what I ask people to do is apply for the course, or I have a free training that actually goes over everything that they need to know about the course. Then if they're ready to get started, they can just apply or just send me an email and then we kind of go from there.
Perfect. How much is it?
Yeah, so the course is $4,000.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, so it's 12 months, it's $4,000. And I have two different options for them. So for those who want the coaching with me, they want me to hold their hand through the process, it's the $4,000. And for those who are like, I just want the information, I don't think I need coaching, then it's actually 1,500. And
Okay,
so
perfect.
they have those two options if they want coaching or no coaching as well.
Perfect. Thank you. So that actually goes right into technology, which has become a bigger bucket in adoption than it's ever been, given the world that we live in. Do you have any tools or technology solutions or anything that you think adoptive parents should utilize? Before we go on, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. We still have so much to talk about. Hey there, Adoption Roadmap fam. Are you ready to take the next step on your journey to parenthood? If so, head over to our website and take our quiz. It's called, Are You Ready to Adopt? It's not just about testing your knowledge. It's about making sure you're emotionally and practically prepared for the beautiful, complex journey of adoption. Let's make your dream of parenthood a reality. Go to rgadoptionconsulting.com and take the Are You Ready to Adopt quiz today. That's rgadoptionconsulting.com. The quiz is free, and it will let you know where you are in the process and if you're ready to jump into your adoption journey. Do you have any tools or technology solutions or anything that you think adoptive parents should utilize during the preparation?
I honestly, I feel like it'd be really hard to recommend any specific type of technology. In my course, I go very basic, what anybody can do. Google Sheets.
Yeah.
Google Sheets and Google Docs. And so through my program, I already have the templates and the sheets and everything. They just have to infill the information. So for me, I believe organization is the key because there's a lot of information that you have to keep track of. So I have all these templates for, okay, if you're talking to, an adoption attorney, you have something to keep track of who you talked to, their phone number, what you talked about. Are you going to pick him or not? So you have somewhere where you're keeping all this information. So for those who are like, I don't want to learn a new technology, anything, we keep it super simple, make it easy for families.
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you brought the organization up because we also have trackers for people not only to keep track of what agencies and attorneys they've signed up with and called and whatever information they found out, but also as they get situations Like, how many situations have they seen? How many have they
Mhm.
applied to?
Yes,
Which information during the process is so good to be able to help you, um, continue forward. We
yes,
can look at the information and decide what to do next, right?
exactly.
Strategically.
Versus just like Googling, calling, and then you're like, oh, which one did I call and what did they
Right.
say? Yes.
So I think getting yourself set up to be organized is
Yeah,
huge with
it's
technology.
huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge.
So
But I'm always an advocate to keep everything as simple as possible.
I agree.
But yeah, do you have any technology places or resources that you recommend for your families?
Well, I mean, beside just the trackers being technologically resourceful, um, not in particular. There are a lot of places now that people can host their profiles.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm not gonna, I can't come up with any right off the top of my head, but there are a lot out there that you can host your profiles, and I consider that technology, right? Because it's
Yeah.
based on your profile being found by an expectant mom, by another agency to
Mhm.
potentially do a match. Some of them are great. Some of them may not be so great. I'm not really up on the ins and outs of all of that, but
It's
I
just
know a
so
lot of people
many of
do.
them.
Mm-hmm.
It's so hard to keep, like, how do you pick which one is the
And
best?
sometimes it's
You know?
just, can you do them all? Do them all. Sometimes I think more is more with adoption,
Yeah.
you know, while you keep track of everything for sure, but you never know how it is that you are going to match. So, whatever you can do, do, and be careful, because also the more you put yourself out there, the more you open yourself up for scrutiny and
Yeah.
for
Oh,
scammers. Yeah.
yeah, I want to add to that actually. I know that we're all in the technology age right now, right? There's so much, everybody on social media, which is great. Social media is good, and bad. But
Sure.
I actually find a lot of my families are getting matched by word of mouth. The old school way still works, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So I've had so many families matched by just telling their friends and their family members, their doctor,
Mm-hmm.
wherever they were going. They were like posting, I don't know, stuff like at coffee shops or just telling everybody they knew. And I am still amazed to this day how many. So I have an example for you.
Oh,
So
great.
one of my students, she works at a hospital. So and she's a nurse. So of course she told everybody in the hospital, "Hey, we're adopting. Hey, we're adopting." Well, somehow this pregnant teenager had come to the hospital and
Mm.
she decided that she wanted an adoption plan. I mean, she was dead set on, I want to place this baby for adoption. And then, of course, because they knew that this nurse wanted to adopt, they contacted her. Hey, I didn't know if, we just wanted to let you know that this teenager is here. She's talking about adoption. We know you're adopting. And she did end up adopting this teenager's baby all by word of mouth, all because she just told everyone about it. And I have so many stories of families who have adopted that way. And so, yes, technology is still good, but I think don't underestimate the power of the old school just telling people that you're adopting. And you might be surprised at the possible matches that you can have with pregnant moms by just word of mouth.
100%. I'm
Yeah.
wondering if you have another story of somebody who, because of the work they did up front, with, utilizing resources, getting educated, that it made a significant difference in their journey.
Yeah, yeah. So I actually have a student who they had worked with an agency. So what the way they started out was they Googled, like every family does. They Googled how to adopt, and so they spent about 6 months researching, and the family found this agency that they felt really comfortable with. This agency in Colorado. So they started working with the agency. They're middle class. They didn't have a ton of money, so this agency was going to work with their budget, which they really liked. So they started working with this agency in Colorado. 2.5 years later, they had never even gotten like a potential match, nothing. I mean, it was just crickets for 2.5 years. So finally they were thinking, man, like, what do we do? We could just keep sitting here for a couple more years, or we can just try something different. Maybe we're missing something. So they somehow found out about my program, contacted me, and they joined the program. And I think they joined like in January of, I'm trying to think of the year, I think it was 2022, January of 2022. And in December of 2022, their baby girl came home. So this is the difference between having the right type of information that you need, right? So they did it on their own. They found the agency, all of that, and they thought it was good, but they wasted 2.5 years and a lot of money versus investing in the education and the information they needed, which then led to within 12 months bringing their baby home. So this is not like a get rich quick type of thing. This is literally the power of having the right information you need to make the right decisions along the way. That's going to save you all of this time and money, that you really don't need to spend
Yes.
just by having the right information. So I have several families that's happened to where they were working with somebody else. Just they were like, we're so tired of waiting. We just need something different. And then getting the right information. And just like that, they were like, oh, we didn't know that we could self-match, or we didn't know that this resource was out there. And so they tried that, and there you go. They were matched and baby came home within a couple of months. So it's really powerful to have the right type of resources and information that you need.
Thank you. I think this is so important, just this whole conversation. So I appreciate you being here and imparting your knowledge on us. And what a great way to end with those stories. And there's so many of those stories, right? That like the kismet moments and the, all those things. Thank you for sharing with us. We end all of me and my whole team here standing behind me, and like to end the podcast with some rapid fire questions. And the first one is really a shout out to somebody who deserves it. Is there a person or an organization that you can think of that has really made a positive impact on you in the adoption world?
Yes, I would say Funding Love. Funding Love is an organization that really helps with post-adoption families. They help birth moms, they help adoptive families, and obviously the adopted children by providing a free trip to Disney. So huge shout out to Funding Love.
I love that. Thanks. We haven't heard that one yet. What's one of the most important lessons you've learned over your career as an adoption attorney?
Having the right type of information during the adoption process will make or break your adoption.
Awesome. Have you utilized or had mentors, and is there somebody that's been a really important professional mentor to you? You can name or not name, but.
Yes. There's another adoption attorney here in Nebraska who, when I first started, she was so gracious to give me all of her stuff that I needed to get started. And so that's what really helped me to learn the law, to know what to do when I got my first client. And so I'm forever grateful to her for just sharing everything she had. She's like, it's not a competition. I want to help out another attorney. So yes, that's who I would say the biggest thanks to.
What's your biggest pet peeve?
When people complain about the cost of newborn adoption. If we're talking about adoption specifically, that would be my biggest pet peeve.
Finally, 3 words to describe adoption.
Fulfilling, hard, saves lives.
Thank you so much, Lucrece Bundy, for being here today. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give it a follow and a like and a review. Of course, we love 5-star reviews. And stay tuned every Wednesday and Friday morning for more insights on adoption and guidance on your journey. Thanks for being here. Bye. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. If you did, I have a few favors to ask of you. First, please hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And while you're at it, I'd love to hear your takeaways. Please write a review and let me know what you liked. And if you have a question or a suggestion on what you'd like to hear, I'd love to hear that too. Please shoot me an email at support@rgadoptionconsulting.com and let me know what you'd like to hear about. And if you have a question, I may just answer it online. Thanks again for listening. Tune in every Wednesday and Friday morning for a brand new episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. Until next time, bye-bye.